Eating meat is not easy. Meat is the body of another animal, an animal that runs, that tries to avoid being captured. Hunters need great physical capacity, and every attempt is a risk. Failures are frequent, and with each one, hunger increases and energy is reduced. That is why the majority of the survivors of the planet Earth use a different system to obtain food. Gathering means collecting, accumulating different things. Gather animals spend their whole time moving around, almost always eating grasses, fruits and leaves, but often they also come across honey, insects or eggs which supplement their diet. Vegetables generally have fewer proteins than meat, but they're all around and do not flee. So the only thing you need to do is eat a great quantity of them, and at the same time try to make sure the carnivores do not eat you. Hunters and gatherers, both systems have their pros and their cons. Hunters may spend weeks between one meal and the next, periods of enforced fasting which are compensated for when they are successful. The primates, well adapted to eating fruits up in the trees, always complement their diet with insects and eggs they occasionally find, and they conserved this custom when they came down from the trees some 15 million years ago. However, gathering plants sometimes forces them to travel long distances. Droughts began and the herds had to migrate in search of places with water and vegetation. They were followed by another type of killer, a descendant of vegetarians who had acquired a taste for meat. Man applied all his intelligence to hunting, inventing all kinds of tricks to compete with large carnivores. Unlike them, he soon realized that the life of the hunter is too uncertain, and that a growing population of humans could not depend exclusively on meat. The solution was to combine the two systems, to gather fruits, berries, roots and leaves to see them through the long periods of unsuccessful hunting. But then humans asked themselves, what would happen if, instead of going out in search of food, I grew it right here by my house? In the interior of these jungles on the island of Borneo lives a primate whose knowledge of botany is incredible. It can spend months up in the trees looking for fruit without ever coming down to the ground. That animal is the orangutan. But in this world of apparent abundance, gathering plants is not as simple as it seems. Not all the trees bear fruit at the same time, and sometimes not even all the branches of the same tree. The orangutan has a memory capable of recognizing over 400 different types of food. It must remember the exact place of each species of tree and the approximate date on which the fruits mature. It must also avoid the poisonous parts of some of them, as well as the thorns or hard skins. All of this it learns from its mother over years, observing her on her wanderings around the jungle. An efficient gatherer like the orangutan, and like our simian ancestors, must have good sight in order to recognize the bright colors of the fruits in the jungle, while the carnivores see in black and white, giving preference to movement and nocturnal vision. A good gatherer has a discerning palate to distinguish the sweet flavor of ripe fruits and taste them to remove the indigestible parts. Carnivores, on the other hand, swallowed large pieces of meat without tasting them at all. A gatherer must have hands with agile fingers to peel the fruits and cling onto the branches, whereas a carnivore prefers claws. Finally, a gatherer needs a large, efficient brain to remember every corner of its habitat. The orangutan teaches us that a lot of what we have in common is due to the fact that, like it, we too were once gatherers. The problem is that adaptation to a specific vegetarian diet means that the animal becomes entirely dependent on certain vegetable species. That is exactly what happened to the lemurs on the island of Madagascar, just 400 kilometers from the southeast coast of Africa. The lemurs are in reality ancient primates, very similar to the ancestor which would later give rise to all the different monkeys. They are therefore called proto-simians. The lemurs became isolated in Madagascar before this happened, and unlike everywhere else on the planet, were saved from extinction there. In this way, the lemurs followed their parallel evolution and adapted to the different habitats and plant foods of the island. Today, 33 species of lemur survive, so totally specialized that almost all depend on the bush and tree species on which they feed, which grow only in Madagascar. They could not, therefore, live anywhere else, even if they wanted to. With all the characteristics of a jungle-dwelling, fruit-eating primate, including the most efficient brain on the planet, humans took gathering to limits never before reached by any animal. In the same way as these Australian Aborigines still do today, humans became great specialists, adapted to different types of food. So, if a given resource became scarce, this was immediately compensated for by the abundance of another. Memory and experience were gradually accumulated among human clans, which spread throughout the world thanks to their ability to gather not only vegetable foods, but also the energy reserves accumulated by other animals in the form of honey, wax, or eggs. Progressive knowledge of the habits of other animals led the insatiable human gatherer to try virtually everything. With the discerning palate of the simians, man began to appreciate an increasing variety of foods and incorporated them into his culture as one more mark of identity. Again, the cultural progress of the human species happened so quickly that in just a few generations it had colonized virtually the entire planet. The human hunter-gatherer passed on increasingly efficient techniques to his children and grandchildren, and so an invaluable store of knowledge was accumulated. Our ancestors survived in this way for some 2 million years. Even today we can learn much if we are capable of interpreting the information contained in these prehistorical paintings and petroglyphs. But as our ancestors evolved, the climate continued to change and large areas of forest were progressively replaced by bush savanna at the edge of the desert. Then the groups of hominids had to cope with harsher conditions as still today occurs on the other side of the planet.